It's coming on 10 years since the tragedy of the Marikana massacre. As the country prepares to commemorate that ignominious moment and questions persist about justice for the families of the 44 killed in the 10 days of violence, a new exhibition seeks to re-invoke the imagery and the memory of that day and continues to pay testament to a moment that South Africa will never forget. Artist and activist Haroon Gunn-Salie joins me, as well as Thato Masiangoake, who is a researcher at the Socio-economic Rights Institute of South Africa. To the pair of you, good evening. Thank you very much for being on our program. Haroon, I want to come to your Senzeni Na exhibition first. I had the opportunity to look at your installation, and I couldn't help but thinking, when I was listening to the soundtrack, just share with me the inspiration for the way that the sound, was scored or was developed. It sounds a little bit like the Islamic call to prayer in a way. It's got that kind of haunting lilt to it, and kind of, in a way, the way I interpreted it, a kind of call to action.
Thank you, Iman. Absolutely. And the piece has two elements. It has a sculptural element that viewers walk through, and then it has a surround sound 5.1 surround sound experience, where we worked very closely with a lot of archive, and we also worked in studio with vocalists to bring that fateful day to life, really, in a incredibly visceral way, and it includes archive from the workers just before they disassembled, and then faced the police line at the end of the day almost 10 years ago.
It certainly is an evocative and a haunting space, and forgive me, I suppose, as somebody who, and that's the nature of art, is that it's also interpretive. What we hear, in the pauses and in the spaces in that music was just so powerful to me, and that's what I sort of got out of it. But the way the figures are spaced out in that piece, it allows people to walk through and move and engage with the sculptures. Why was that an important aspect of not just standing back and having something to look at, but to have literally, as many of your senses as possible engage?
Look, the sculptures themselves are reconstructed through police footage that was actually used in the trial to prove that the workers were disassembling peacefully. And we kind of freeze-framed that moment in history right before the bullets rained, to sort of say, what would have happened if that single moment in history never happened. And this is the footage from scene one, as I said, the figures are presented in a sort of ghostly, incredibly dehumanized way, without the identity of their heads, right? Because there's this complete defilement, right, of their massacre. And the work was actually premiered in New York at the New Museum at a triennial exhibition called Songs for Sabotage. And what was so interesting about the way that viewers could immerse themselves in the installation is that it was right after the Take a Knee, and so many people actually sort of took a knee in solidarity to on the one hand to Marikana, and also to the resonances that they were experiencing at that moment in the US as well.
That is such a powerful, continuum of consciousness that you're sharing there. I mean, I relate with it, and, to talk as the kids do in a way, you kind of really, connect or vibe with it so much. I know that you've traveled with it to London. You mentioned New York, but Tokyo as well. This is the first time it's being shown in South Africa. Thato, I want to bring you into the conversation, Thato Masiangoake from SERI. What Haroon is sharing with us is just one way to provoke memory, one way to re-invoke the horror, in a way, of that day, that moment, which has sullied our history. But what we have is this living legacy of families connected to that, who are yet to encounter or experience justice. Just share with us, from your perspective and through the work that SERI does, why there's so many questions that we still need to answer. And this is a great opportunity in this moment of recollection and memory to do just that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. For us, and especially the families whom we've been working with, what they've experienced, I think, since 2012 is really just a lack of honesty and a lack of truth, let alone acknowledgement. I think theirs is a story of, right from the beginning, fighting for recognition. So even being having to fight to be recognized at the Commission of Inquiry, which sat for 2 years, which initially didn't even believe that they needed to hear from the families what this loss has meant for them. That then has, gone on for acknowledgement from the state. And part of that, central to that, in fact, has been a demand for an apology from the state, which the families are yet to receive. So on the one hand, I think the families have had to sort of try and cope with their loss over the past 10 years without all of the facts. We do know that there is a trial that is ongoing related to matters of the 13th of August, where 3 mine workers and 2 police officers were killed. That trial, I think, has been sitting well over a year, if not 2 years now. And what the families consistently emphasize is that, hearing from people who were there on the day has been so important for them to understand just the details and the circumstances of how their own loved ones were lost. And unfortunately, the Commission of Inquiry, which they expected would be able to provide some of those answers, did not go far enough from their perspective. And unfortunately, theirs has been a struggle for acknowledgement and justice. And justice, I think, would not only come in the form of full reparations, an unconditional apology, but also an understanding that something like that cannot happen again. And I think the crisis that we see in policing over the past couple of years speaks to a failure, I think, on the part of the state to really address Marikana, hold those responsible accountable, and to ensure that the police move forward in a way that something like that can't happen again. So issues around the use of force that they can and cannot use, what does accountability mean, and all of those kinds of issues, unfortunately, have not been dealt with adequately and with decisiveness.
And one would think, Thato, given just the impact that it had on South African society, just how many questions it made us ask about ourselves, the kind of skirting around the issue of true accountability, and also just humanity to those communities of saying, we recognize that something really bad went on. We've seen people almost retreat into the preservation of their careers or their own reputations. How much of an indictment is it on the political and the enforcement complex in South Africa that we are still 10 years on, yet to determine exactly what needs to be said and what needs to be done, to really, demonstrate true justice and accountability?
Yeah, I mean, I think a core issue, at least from our assessment, has been just a lack of political will, sort of leaving the justice system to sort of grind on with time and sort of let that process unfold is what we're just expected to rely on. But with a situation like this, which I do think was extraordinary in and of itself, right? One of the highest police casualties, in post-1994 South Africa, it hasn't been given, I guess, the attention in terms of accountability and full redress that we would have expected.
Yeah.
And so I think what you speak about how it's set in our collective consciousness, a number of communities immediately after Marikana, informal settlements and that emerged and named themselves Marikana, identifying with that brutality, identifying their own struggles with what happened to the mine workers, who were not only fighting for a living wage, but better working conditions. And so much of the issues in the mining sector, I think, persist in this way. And I guess we can see... Go ahead.
No, complete your sentence.
I was just going to say that I think we see Marikana in different forms in South Africa since 2012.
Yeah.
And that does, I think, it is an indictment on the state.
Haroon, I want to turn the last question over to you. Do you see your work as an incomplete work that might be organic, added upon as the story unfolds and develops? Is it tightly connected with the developments in the story?
Well, I mean, absolutely. It's an ongoing project, the unfortunate thing is, or the not unfortunate, the difficult thing is, in a case like Marikana, and we've heard such critical detail now, is how do you even begin to memorialize struggles that are so ongoing? With whom do you memorialize them with? Is it you? I mean, can you work with the state in order to memorialize something that actually had state accountability? Did it have state accountability? There's blood on someone's hands, right? And somehow this work is trying to become part of the opening out of the continued struggle for the truth and for justice. So yes, it's an ongoing project. At first, we hadn't developed the sound to the state that it's in now. Currently, it's a cinematic, really, really special piece of experiential art, and hopefully through this presentation now in the 10-year commemoration, it could be sort of put in a space where even more people could access it or respond to it or help develop it in some way or form.
Artist and activist Haroon Gunn-Salie, thank you for your time, and Thato Masiangoake from the Socio-economic Rights Institute. Really appreciate you as well.